Hi, I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. This past Saturday was Free Comic Book Day 2023, and one of the offerings for that day was this comic book length excerpt of I Am Stan. The full book is coming out in September. This is a little sampler, and it's taken from the prime era of Stan Lee. This excerpt is from the 60s while he's working with, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Dick Ayers, John Romita, Roy Thomas. This is sort of, the era when Stan was working on the things that really made his reputation. Yeah, it's described right here as, Stan Lee in his prime, which is, a great way to describe it. It's just funny because it's Stan Lee in his prime, but it's not the sort of iconic Stan Lee we know with the mustache and the aviator shades. He doesn't really have the showbiz pizzazz that we associate with him. He hasn't reinvented himself. But this is the time when he is doing the real work that he will be remembered for. He became more famous later, but he never did anything quite as great as the things he's doing in this era. So, prime is really a great way to describe it. And so it says, we joined Stan Lee in his prime as the editorial director of Marvel, doing the work that will become the foundation of his legacy and reputation. His collaboration with other comics icons like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko results in the creation of some of our most well-known superheroes today. Managing those relationships and working with Martin Goodman, owner of Marvel, is trickier than it seems, though, and every great comic victory comes with its own hurdles. Couldn't have said it better myself. Jack and Stan talking out some ideas for an incredible new character, the Hulk. Then we got Jack and Stan working on the Thor, and Larry Lieber gets roped in to work on it too. Then Stan likes the job he did on Thor so much he gives him another one to work on, a science fiction story about a guy who shrinks down and gets caught up in an ant colony, and they end up sort of turning him into a superhero. They have Hank Pym return, but this time as the superhero Ant-Man with Jack Kirby. The Fantastic Four has already come out before this, and now they got the Fantastic Four in costumes. Now they're trying to come up with the next big thing, and it's Iron Man. Stan goes to his go-to guy to write the script, and it's his brother Larry. Then Jack brings in SpiderMan. Stan wants Ditko to ink it. Ditko says it reminds him of The Fly, and Stan was not really aware of that. And once Ditko points that out to him, Ditko's offering ideas, maybe add a revenge element like Batman. Martin Goodman, the owner of Marvel, does not like it. I don't like it, Stan Lee. Spiders don't sell. Nobody likes spiders. Why would they buy a comic book about them? Stan tells the bad news to Ditko that they're shelving Spider-Man. Amazing Adult Fantasy is getting canceled. This sort of intellectual experimental comic Stan's been working on with Steve Ditko. And so since the last issue is getting canceled anyway, he's going to sneak Spider-Man into it. And then he and Jack collaborate on XMen, which they call the Mutants. Martin Goodman says, mutants, nobody knows what a mutant. Mutants, Stanley, nobody knows what a mutant is. Call it something else, anything else. And so then they change it to XMen. Steve Ditko invents the corner box. Stan takes Ditko's idea and puts it on all the comics. They go to dinner at Martin Goodman's house, and seeing how well he lives as a comics publisher, while Stan sort of toils. And Ditko pitches Doctor Strange to Stan. 'Twas Steve's idea, as Stan once said. Now they have a hole in their schedule. Stan and Jack need to come up with something to fill the schedule with, and they come up with something that Martin Goodman's been asking for a long time. Martin Goodman had been asking them for a Justice League, and what they created was the Fantastic Four, which isn't exactly a Justice League. It's not taking existing characters or your greatest hits of characters, with the exception of maybe the Human Torch, sort of. But but they decide, okay, we're going to do an actual Justice League, especially like now that we have a roster of heroes to draw from. We can create a superhero team made up of our existing line of superheroes. Stan Lee, about how he was making this sort of photo book called You Don't Say, where he puts funny captions on photos. And this one features John F. Kennedy, and it's, little jokes, and then the Kennedy assassination happens. The whole Marvel thing starts taking off. Marvel starts, getting a college following, and Stan starts being asked to, give speeches at schools. Roy Thomas comes over. Stan offers him a job, but he's working at DC, but which is like his dream job. But he doesn't really like the atmosphere at DC, and so then he decides to jump ship and go over to Marvel. And Stan teaches him the Marvel method of art first, dialogue second. We got the creation of Daredevil. Bill Everett, is gone from the book almost as soon as he enters. Replaced by Joe Orlando, and then ultimately by Wally Wood, who kind of like revolutionizes the look of the comic. We got the first Stan soapbox. We have the origin of Excelsior. And this one's fun. The Merry Marvel Marching Society record recording. Steve Ditko would prefer not to participate, so they sort of write him into the script of the Merry Marvel Marching Society record. They write him into the script with a silent part. And Stan is trying to get John Romita to, come back and work for Marvel. But, John had a bad experience the last time because of the sort of like layoffs, I guess you would call them, when there was sort of like the mass firing of like everybody at Marvel. And so, he doesn't want to go through that again. And he was never... and the story that John Romita would tell is that, he told his wife, to tell Stan Lee to drop dead. That was the famous quote. But, Stan tells him it's going to be different this time. Comics are selling really well. And then there's a blackout, and Stan keeps going. Even there's a blackout, because what else am I going to do? Comics never stops. And we start getting the butting of heads between Stan and Wally Wood. This, the honeymoon's over. Wally Wood does not like this, Marvel method. He doesn't like the idea of him doing all the heavy lifting, all the real writing, and then from his point of view, the real writing. And then Stan sort of comes in at the last minute and maybe tweaks the dialogue or changes the dialogue or adds the dialogue. But Wally doesn't get credited as writer, even though he did all the heavy lifting, while Stan does like a final pass of dialogue. And Wally doesn't like the arrangement, and so they part ways. Now, John Romita, who Stan sort of brought him back with the promise that it's just going to be inking, because John said, comics, it's just way more work than it's worth. And whole ink, that's fine, because inking you can do no problem. But he doesn't want to have to do all that, like sort of, the heavy lifting that Wally Wood was talking about. But now, Wally Wood's gone, and so Stan kind of ropes him in to ropes John Romita into taking over for Wally Wood on Daredevil. And Stan has Romita study, Jack Kirby's work, and Jack Kirby kind of, says, it shows him, okay, this, and this, and, does some quick layouts. What's the Kirby way of doing stuff? And then Stan starts working from home at his wife Joan's urging. He asks Martin if he can work from home. Martin's like, yeah, sure. And can I have off 3 days a week? He pushes it further, and Martin's like, hey, as long as the writing is still good, you take it if you want. And so now he's not in the office as much. Then Jack brings in the Galactus Story, this famous story of Jack Kirby bringing in the Galactus Story, and Roy Thomas was there to witness it. And Stan's like, who's this? Who's the nut on the surfboard? Who's the nut on the surfboard, Jack? And Jack explains that Galactus has a herald. Stan is, blown away by what Jack is bringing him, and so he wants to, sort of match with words what Jack Kirby's bringing sort of story and plot and visual, and he wants to match with dialogue. So I'm gonna have to really embody this whole thing. And so that's the pressure Stan's feeling. And so he says how he was, from the very beginning, felt very attracted to, very connected to the character of the Silver Surfer. And so he's like pulling out his best writing for this story. I've never heard anyone speak so strangely, and yet there was a certain nobility in your voice. And then John Buscema comes back, similar to how John Romita came back. John Buscema, was one of the guys who was sort of, left in the dust when everybody was sort of laid off back in the late 50s. And so but now he's coming back. Stan's trying to get as many of like the old crew, the old band back together. And now this is where they say like Jack and Stan's relationship really, was never the same afterward. Was this article that was written for the Herald Tribune, an article about Marvel and stuff, and it ends up being Jack did not like the way he was portrayed in this article. It sort of made Stan seem like the hero of Marvel, and Jack as his flunky, and Jack didn't like it, and he blamed Stan for Stan's fault, and it just was never the same after that. And the relationship was never the same after that. It was the beginning of the end, you might say. And then Steve Ditko quits. Stan's telling John Romita that he's taking over Spider-Man, and John Romita is like, no thanks. The fans will show up with pitchforks. But he talks John Romita into it. Stan is a motivator. And now look, this sort of this decisive moment, this turning point in Stan's career. We have the they were talking about like, the revelation of, because Mary Jane was like, while Stan and Ditko worked on it together, it worked on Spider-Man, you never saw Mary Jane's face, and it's like, okay, what's Mary Jane gonna look like? And Romita was like, she should be a knockout. And so here it is. Ditko's gone. Romita's taken over Spider-Man. And again, that pressure, you're working on something, and, Stan writes what might be the iconic line of his career. Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. In the show notes below, there's a pre-order link where you can pre-order the full book and find out the rest of the story in September when I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee comes out. I'm Tom Scioli, and I'll see you next time.